the radio guy, Mike Prince. Welcome to another special episode of the Mike Prince Show. As you know, we come to you each and every day, and today would be no exception to the rule. The only exception to today's rule is we have a special guest who's going to talk again about my beloved Pittsburgh Steelers. I want to remind you that our social media handles are Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter are at the Mike Prince Show. The YouTube channel is Open Mic Broadcast Network. And don't forget the 24-hour dial-in message line, 713-570-6736. And without any further delay, we'll jump right into today's episode. And we want to present to some and introduce to others none other than the voice of Locked On Steelers, Mr. Tony Serino. How you doing, my friend?
Very good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you again for making yourself available. We had part one of the dynamic duo with Christopher and from Christopher Critiques on board with us. So we said we might as well get Mr. Tony in. And before we get any further, man, why don't you do an introductory of who you are and what you're doing, and we'll jump right into Steeler Talk.
Yeah. So I'm the host of Locked On Steelers. I am from I'm in Orlando, so I'm not inside the city of Pittsburgh, but I do the show from down here in Orlando. Got started in podcasting, I guess it was 11 years ago, with a show called Steeler Country that I did with my dad and my uncle. We did that for 10 years almost before David Locke from the Locked On Network reached out, asked me to be the host of Locked On Steelers. And I've been doing that for the past year and a half.
Very good, man. And I want to let you know that I've been following you just about as long on 11 years. Didn't realize it kind of tied the two together when we were talking earlier. But a diehard Steeler fan on this end, and I know you guys on that end. And first things first, just jump straight into it. I believe all is going to be well in the land of the Steel City.
Well, that's the hope, right? That's the hope. And I think, this has been a long, arduous offseason. It started right with the Antonio Brown situation in week 17, and it got pretty ugly for that first half of the offseason. But things have quieted down now, and I think there's a cautious optimism around the Steelers that this team, while they, how much better did they really get this offseason from a personnel perspective? I like some of the additions, but, the subtractions of Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell are a big deal. And how is this team going to replace that? I think, getting rid of the drama and having a culture that is about football once again. And I think it's something that I know fans of the team are just so excited about this year is getting back to football, getting back to X's and O's, getting back to caring about what this team does on the field and less about all of the TMZ and the drama off of it.
Well, I believe it is all about addition by subtraction. Yes, you lose in two key components in the likes of Brown and Bell. But in Bell's case, Bell did a business decision. In my opinion, he gambled on himself and lost. That's part of the nature of business. But Antonio, from outside looking in, more drama than the worth, from my opinion. I love his productivity. He's still going to be probably one of the most prolific receivers in the game. However, when it comes to you taking away from the overall aspect of the team, in the long run, I believe the Steelers are going to be better without Brown.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I think you look at what he's brought to this team on the field, right? I mean, it's second to no wide receiver over the past, It's that past 5 to 10 years. But all the drama that came off of it, I agree with you. I think this team is setting itself up with some of its younger guys on offense, guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner. They still got that great offensive line, and they've still got a great quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. All the tools are there for this team to return back to the playoffs and go on another run. And then defensively, I'm not as optimistic as some others about Keith Butler and the defensive coordinator, but I think the talent is starting to get there with guys like T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, and a very young secondary with guys like Terrell Edmonds and Sean Davis.
Well, I know you are a Butler bruiser, man, and I'm going to give you a pass on that. But I'm optimistic. I'm a defensive guy, and I think, of course, the rules have been catered toward the offensive side of the ball. But now with the addition of Bush, which is exciting from a defensive perspective from my end, he is, in my opinion, that missing link that no one could ever replace a Shazier, but he's going to be the next best thing to getting close to what Shazier was able to do on the field before his tragic accident. So now you'll be able to see the flexibility and the creativity of Butler to do some of those unorthodox things that are going to create some havoc. And don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if you see from time to time he'll bring Dupree on the inside just for a different look.
That would be that. Listen, anything this defense can do to give defenses a better look, because I think that's one of Keith Butler's biggest weaknesses, is that this team defensively just got so stale by the end of the year. It was so easy for teams, especially some of the better offenses in the league, to have easy success against this team early in games, but really in the fourth quarter, and how easily this team capitulated leads throughout the season. I mean, people look at that game against New England and they say that this is the standard in Pittsburgh, or this should be the standard defensively. But that was really the exception, that how good the defense played, and not the rule. And you look to other games like against the Raiders and against the Chargers and against the Saints later in the year, and this team, they had leads in those football games, they had them in the fourth quarter, but defensively, they found ways to give them up. So I think you're right about Devin Bush. I think he is absolutely going to be a key component to this defense over the next couple of years. Now, whether or not he can be that guy in his rookie year, I think that remains to be seen. Some Steeler rookies come in, it takes them a little bit to understand the X's and O's and everything about this defense. And so maybe 2019 is not his year, maybe it's 2020, but definitely the future is bright for that defense.
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic than you are, my friend. I believe he's going to be an impact player. And like I said, it's not going to be all on Devin Bush, but what he's capable of doing, he's a guy that you can plug in that position of the middle of the field, and you don't have to worry if he's going to be able to be where he needs to be. Now you have time to tighten up a suspect secondary. And I know that has been the Achilles heel. Even in the heyday of the Steelers, they've always, in my opinion, had a challenge in the secondary. And even when you had the Palomaus, the Ike Taylors, but there were always a play or two from blowing a crucial coverage at a critical time of the game.
Yeah. I mean, you go right back to the last time the Steelers won the Super Bowl, 2008, and we all have the nightmares of Larry Fitzgerald running down the field for what looked like it could be a game-winning touchdown in that game. And it was Ike Taylor in coverage and Troy Polamalu trying to run him down from behind. Absolutely. I mean, the secondary has been a weakness. I've talked about it going all the way back. They haven't drafted a great cornerback since Rod Woodson back in the 80s. It's been a real position of need in the entire secondary. So you look at guys like, well, let's just start with Sean Davis, right? Because Sean Davis is now going into a contract year. Sean Davis, I think he's gotten, I don't want to say it's a bad rap from the Steelers, but, you look at a player in his development, how many times Sean Davis had to change his position. He was originally going to be the nickel corner. Then they moved him to be a strong safety. He doesn't really excel as a strong safety, and they need a free safety to replace Mike Mitchell, so they moved him there. I don't think he was a great free safety last year, but he wasn't a bad free safety. There's certainly room to grow there. Just a question mark about, how much can he really grow now as he goes into the fourth year of his career? Has he peaked already? And is this the best we're ever going to see of Sean Davis? But alongside him, you got a guy in Terrell Edmonds, who I think the sky is the limit for this guy. Now, there's questions about his ability in coverage, and is he just an athlete, or is he a real football player out there? And those are all the questions coming out of college. But I saw some times in camp last year where you saw flashes of a guy who could be a really special player at the strong safety position, looking for him to grow year over year. And then you look at the cornerback spot. You got Joe Hayden on one side. You know what you're going to have out of Joe Hayden. He's been an all-pro throughout his career. Yes, he's in the twilight, but I don't think it's over yet for Joe Hayden. And alongside him, the Steelers finally have a veteran duo with Steven Nelson replacing Cody Sensabaugh from a year ago. I'm excited about what Steven Nelson's going to bring to this team. The more physical player. He is a little bit more of a ball hawk than Cody Sensabaugh was. Now, he's undersized, doesn't have the elite speed, so he's going to have to play off coverage a little bit. I think Steelers fans are maybe going to be frustrated at times with the way he covers, but he's a physical player, and I think he'll make some plays for this team as well.
Well, I have some good buddies of mine who are huge Kansas City Chiefs fans, and they said good riddance for Nelson, and I gladly take him in because, once again, Pittsburgh has proven to be a system organization, and if you fit the system, you can have success. And I believe Nelson is one of those prototypical system players that's going to fit well under the Butler scheme. I know you don't want to hear that, but he's going to fit well under that Butler scheme, and you don't have to worry. And one thing that Nelson is not going to have to do is try to overthink the process of what he needs to be doing, because he was the guy for Kansas City. Now he's
Yeah.
part of a fine-tuned instrument that's being choreographed by Butler on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, I guess I don't know if it's fine tuned just yet, but it's getting there. I mean, I do think that there are positive signs from the Keith Butler defense. It's not as bad as it was maybe a couple years ago. I just question what the identity of this defense is. And, they're good at getting to the quarterback, but that hasn't really gotten them much other than, they led the league in sacks the last couple years, but this defense hasn't been dominating. Like I said, they still allow teams to score too late in the game. The pressures usually come against either the worst teams in the league or early in games. But you're right. I think Steven Nelson's going to be a plug and play guy at that corner spot. Excited what he's going to bring. The rest of whether or not this defense comes together as a whole, like I think you think, and I know my co-host Chris Carter thinks that this team could be a top 10 defense. I don't know that I'm ready to go there just yet. I mean, I think they can be better. I think all the signs are there now. You look back at where this team was a couple of years ago, and you had a lot of question marks about a lot of different positions. I think from a personnel perspective, some of those questions are starting to go away, and now it really is on Keith Butler to put this thing together because he's, with the addition of a guy like Devin Bush, I think that's the last missing piece. And now all of a sudden you have a defense that should be in the top 10.
Absolutely. Now, here's something that I think we have a tendency as fans of Steeler Nation to overlook. Mm-hmm. And I think blown opportunities. How many dropped interceptions did we have within the last 3 to 4 years that turns up? It's like an omen, man. You drop the interception, an obvious interception, 2 or 3 plays later, you're paying for it. That has been an omen for this defense.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that they led the league in dropped interceptions a year ago. I think this was something Joe Hayden talked about at minicamp and OTAs, and he was asked, how does this defense go about creating more turnovers from the secondary, right? Because normally you go about creating turnovers by, first of all, getting pressure on the quarterback, getting the ball out of his hands too quickly, and then making plays in your secondary. Now, as we know, this team has led the league in sacks. The pressure has not been the problem. It's been something on the back end. And he talked about it last year. He talked about it. Look, this team in 2018 dropped too many interceptions. We got to just catch the ones we get our hands on. And some of that just comes down to straight luck, right? There's fumble luck, right? Guys just drop the ball sometimes. You got to be there to pick it up. And sometimes when the ball hits your hands, you got to catch it. And if this team can do that, if they can get their interceptions even back to league average, and you look at how bad this team was last year from a turnover perspective, I don't think that this team needs to go out there and all of a sudden be one of the best teams when it comes to turnovers. But even league average, take this team right to where they need to be defensively, as long as, we go to turn over to the offensive side, as long as the loss of Antonio Brown, doesn't hurt this team too much. We're talking about a team that can compete with anybody.
Absolutely. And when we go back to the Brown effect, what can Brown do for you? He can give me a relief in my stress levels, number one. But the one thing that you have to look at, being through for over 5,000 yards, but he had 15 interceptions. And I don't have the numbers before me. I know you're a numbers guy. How many of those were targeted toward Brown? Because part of the problem is he had to force feed Brown to keep him happy and satisfied so he wouldn't erupt on the sidelines.
I was at a game 2 years ago in Pittsburgh when they were playing the Jaguars, and I believe Ben threw either 5 or 6 interceptions. It was the worst game Ben's ever played in his career. And there was a guy sitting in front of me who was just going ballistic about how many times Ben was trying to force feed the ball to Ben Roethlisberger and how many of those were intercepted. And again, he threw 5 in that game, and maybe 4 of them were targeted to Antonio Brown. It's absolutely true, and I think it's just going to be a pressure relief off of Ben Roethlisberger. Right now, he's going to have a new pressure, which is that he no longer has to force feed the ball to AB, but he's all of a sudden got to make up for the fact that he no longer has an Antonio Brown on this team who's going to make the spectacular plays that we've seen Antonio make for his entire Steeler career. So he's all of a sudden got to start working in, someone like a Dante Moncrief or a James Washington or, Deontay Johnson, the rookie. That's going to be a new pressure for him. But I think you're absolutely right. I think, the idea that Ben Roethlisberger now, when he drops back to pass, he doesn't have that little thing in the back of his head saying, find AB, look for AB, make sure AB's happy. He can now try to read the defense, find the open man, and make a play, and that's something he hasn't been able to do over the past couple of years. Now, that's not to say that Antonio Brown was taking things away from this team, because for everything he took away, I think he gave it back. Right, he made some spectacular plays, won some games for the team that they should not have over the past couple of years. But it's a good point. I think Ben's going to be in a different mindset this year.
And I want you to quote me on this one, my friend. James Washington will have a breakout year in 2019. Now, he won't put up the numbers of Antonio Brown, but he will put up the threat factor that we got to be accountable for this guy when he lines up on the field. So you mark my words on that one. Washington's going to have that breakout year.
I'm right there with you. Last year was my first year attending Steelers training camp, and he was the guy that stood out practice after practice. And it's the most shocking thing for me from going back and what I saw at training camp last year to how he performed in the regular season. It was night and day. I mean, this is a guy who during the preseason and especially day after day in camp was making spectacular catch after spectacular catch. I watched him bring one down over Joe Hayden in the end zone, and Hayden talked about it after practice where he said, this kid's special. Players just don't come out here and do that as a rookie. But he really did disappear during the regular season. I refuse to believe that everything I saw and everything that James Washington did during training camp last year it's all gone. I agree with you. I think he's in for a big year. I think people should expect big things from James Washington because that talent is there. Whatever happened to him last year where he got in his own head, he didn't have that rapport with Ben. If they work that out this offseason, he's a special player.
We're talking right now with Tony Serino, voice of the Locked On Steelers podcast, which is aired daily. This special edition of the Mike Prince Show on the Open Mic Broadcast Network. I get a thrill out of talking about my Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Tony, you have your finger on the pulse here. The spring, not spring training, but the fall training that's coming up. Who do you pick as a dark horse, someone that is off the radar, no one is really talking about? Who do you see as a dark horse to make this team and to make an impact on this 2019 edition of the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, that's a good question because, a lot of these players, I think Chris and I have been doing our position preview over the past couple weeks, and you go down position by position. I think the one thing he and I have been talking about is that a lot of these positions are pretty much settled, right? You go through the quarterback and running back and wide receiver. And while I think, there's some interesting battles there about quarterback and Mason Rudolph be the backup this year. And at running back, I think, running back by committee and wide receiver who steps up to be number two. There really aren't dark horses at those positions. I guess if I'm going to pick one guy, it's another guy who I saw last year at camp, who really came on strong at the end. He had an injury at the end of preseason that kept him from playing in the regular season really until later in the year. But that's Ola Adini, the outside linebacker. That this team needs another edge rusher, especially when you look at the fact that Bud Dupree is in a contract year now. He's making $9.2 million on his fifth-year option. Very unlikely that the Steelers are going to be able to re-sign him at the end of this year, and maybe won't even want to re-sign him given the fact that he just hasn't really reached his potential. But Adini's a guy, he wears number 92. He's an edge rusher. He looks like a little mini James Harrison out there. But he's got some pass rush moves. He's got some good initial burst off the line of scrimmage. He showed this in a couple preseason games, showed it throughout camp. It really got better. I like guys who they get better as camp goes along, right? You come out, they got, they're deer in headlights, they're trying to adjust themselves to the speed of the game, but you want to see guys who get a little better every day. Ola Adini did that. He got a hamstring injury that kept him out. He kept him kind of out of the lineup for those first couple weeks. Got in against the Chargers, made a little splash, but I think 2019 could be a big year for him.
And you know who I'm picking? And you probably are going to fall over when I tell you this, but I'm picking Boswell.
Okay.
I think it's going to be a year of redemption for him. He's been a very accurate, steady kicker for the Steelers for the past few seasons. And last year, I think it was something, I don't have any proof of this, but psychologically off the field that was messing with him. I think he's going to come back and prove everybody wrong.
And if you're right, I mean, that rights a lot of the wrongs that happened in 2018. I guess you go back to 2017, this guy couldn't miss. I mean, he was making game winner after game winner, high pressure kick after high pressure kick. I think he made a 51-yard game winning field goal in Heinz Field. I mean, it's just a miraculous effort
in the danger zone of Heinz Field, not just where this is, You don't go in this. That's the Bermuda Triangle of Heinz Field, kicking in that direction.
Yeah.
So I believe he's going to have the breakout year in 2019, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, if he comes back and he's that guy again, he's the can't miss Chris Boswell again. A lot of people just look at the 2018 season and just say it was a kicking problem, right? Get rid of the fact that defensively they might have given up some leads late. Get rid of the fact that they might have turned the ball over a few too many times late in games. Just look at the kicking game, and that might have cost them a playoff spot. So if Chris Boswell gets back to that point, I think this 2019 team could be a playoff team again.
Yes, sir, and that at least that's my eyes, fingers, and toes crossed for that to happen, man. And it's always something. Well, look, man, I am thoroughly excited about this opportunity to have you on our show. I consider it an honor, a blessing, and just a treat for us and our listeners that are locked in on our show. I want you to let people know how they can listen to your podcast that's daily, Locked On Steelers. And you guys do a wonderful job, but I'm going to go ahead and let you share that information right now.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. Yeah, people can listen to us over at Locked On Steelers. You can go to iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts. If you search Locked On Steelers and hit the subscribe button, you'll hear us every day. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Steeler Country. My co-host, Chris, is at Carter Critiques. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram as well. You can follow there. We post the podcast there as well.
All right. Well, look, Chris, I'm sorry, and I'm calling you Chris, but Tony, look, I sent a message by Chris earlier, and we chuckled about it. But man, you're such high energy, and I told him, I said, man, make sure Tony don't get on too many energy drinks at one time, man, because you bring the funk, man, you bring the noise, and you keep me animated and glued to when you guys come on. I would say every day, but I know it's in the off-season part, but every other day during the off-season, but every day during the football season.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you. And, I mean, me and Chris are just trying to have a fun time. It's a little hard during the off-season, not a whole lot going on, but that's gonna finish up this week when training camp kicks off on Friday.
Absolutely. He is Tony Serino. I am the radio guy, Mike Prince. Want to thank you guys so much for being a part of our special edition of the Pittsburgh Steelers version from the Mike Prince Show. You guys be blessed, and we'll see you on the other side.